All right, so here is my code walkthrough. I do have the screencast for the game that I'm going to load up right before this. Basically, my game, I use the Photon networking, Unity Networking Plus to do the multiplayer. Um, Actually, I found Unity pretty easy to work through and implement a lot of this stuff. So here's a bit of code. I found that I really didn't have to code that much using Unity. Um, I created basically a network manager using the Photons version of their mono behavior to set up actually running the game and uh, being able to have those remote procedural calls and things like that to go out so that everything would be up to date when they're running each other. So here, using that serialized field, that's so that I can still have it private, but I can link the data, link the pieces into the components and stuff like that. And so when I start, I actually am using 4 sets of spawn points, so I have it just going into an array um, that I can use to randomize where a person is going to get put on there. And then I'm calling to join the lobby. Um, so when the thing is running, it's going to connect to the master and let me know the debug log. When it joins the lobby, I am actually setting a couple things. So I set my room options to have a max of 10 players in there. And I call a function that Photon already has, and I just name it battle room with my room options. So then once it starts, once a person joins the room, and I actually have a lobby camera that I set up before the player is actually created in the room, just kind of doing like an overview, like what you see in the other, like multiplayer games. So it's just kind of like a game camera that gets set to false, and I randomize my position based off that array for where they spawn, where the player spawns based off the position and the rotation of where they are. And then here I'm actually printing off the text that you see in the top of the screen, letting a player know if they are connected. And then I am running through, now this is the rest of my code, kind of running through the total death count. So when a player dies, I'm actually trying to get that from all of the players until I get like a max death amount, and that's how I generate when the game is done. So I am pulling objects of type, so all the game objects, and then I'm checking all of those game objects um, that have a health component. So if uh, they do have a health component, so like all the barriers and the ballistics, those do not have a health component. So it should be pulling up um, just the players that uh, are playing in the game. So once I have that, then I am adding, to a main number, a main integer. I'm adding all of the death counts for each player, and if that is more than the winning count, what's my winning count again? Winning count, I'm just having it max as 50, and then it gets reset. So this is right here is how I'm kind of generating who is the winning person. So we start off, 50. So if the person has, let's say, 5 deaths, then that becomes kind of the max. So then if a person has 4 deaths, then they're going to become the winning count. And then I'm looking for inside that array the winning position or, the game object, the player who won would have the least amount of deaths. When the total deaths get to the total amount of players times 4, so if there's 2 players, once the total count gets to larger than 8, then the game ends, and I generate my end game. which is throwing up um, new text on the screen that's going to say the winner, and should be pulling up, which I see that it's a little buggy when I play it, but it is throwing up who that person is. It's just not always as accurate as I want, so I'm still kind of working on that piece. Um, and then it's putting that to a string on there, and then setting that panel that I have in my main scene, the battle car scene, as true. So it sees it, and then I'm putting a pause for 3 seconds before I am initiating the leave room command. So when I leave the room, um, I'm leaving the room that was created with the photon network, disconnecting everything, destroying everything, and then loading uh, a new scene. So the loading new scene, that will pause for a little bit. So it'll be 4 seconds before it's calling this, which is just doing the end game scene, which they can call back to rejoin the room and play again, or they can choose to quit the application. So all that is I'm just calling the active scene, looking at that build index, and then going up +1. So that's basically how I'm kind of running everything. Now I do have different stuff attached. So like my player movement, that is attached to every player, where I have my turn speed, my forward speed, and then my input values. Now, when I was implementing accelerometer, I was thinking it was a whole lot more complex. It's actually really easy to implement accelerometer input because it just maxes out at 1 and -1. So I didn't even have to clamp anything. I didn't have to do any of that. And actually didn't really want to work when I did. So I take the input. Here is where I was taking the original input when I was just using the keys. And then for the move and for the turn functions, I have it switching. The fire button still works. It treats it as a mouse input. So as soon as I touch the screen, it just automatically fires. And then I have a cooldown so they can't shoot within like half a second of each other. So they can't just do rapid fire. Okay, so my fixed update, this is what you're supposed to be using when you're using physics, as it's treated better. I'm taking this is if it's less than -1, so if they fall off the world, then I am going to that player and I am generating their death, or I'm doing my move and turn, and then the fire button. This is so that I can have it where if they are moving forward, so unless they're like moving backwards, if they're moving forward, it's actually going to hurt them when they're trying to fire the weapon, like shoot the gun, because they're moving forward. Like in a normal tank, you're not supposed to be moving forward when you're firing. So, and then here, this is a remote procedural call to send to all players on the photon network inside the room that we're calling the fire command, so that everybody is seeing the projectiles being fired. So here is where I'm instantiating the bullet being created using the prefab, and the bullet spawn position is actually set like right outside the gun, or well, like which I had to end up taking off the collider off of the gun so that it'd be able to fire out. Making sure that it's not going to sleep, and then I'm generating the force and everything for firing it out. My move function, this is how it was originally written before I used the accelerometer. Adding the accelerometer, all I had to do was just do input.acceleration minus the the negative of it or the positive of it for me to go forward and back, and that actually worked really well. And then for turning, I'm just doing the accelerometer input for X, and then using a Euler of the quaternion to take this as my turn, and then using that to do a rotation of the quaternion to give my turn rotation, which then I'm putting in for moving the person. When I do call the fire, then the bullets, so each bullet is going to have a mono behavior attached to it, that I'm actually checking for collision. So the collision, so once they hit a barrier, I'm just having it destroy the bullet. Once they hit a player, then I'm actually taking attack damage. So I am getting the person that was hit, the game object that was hit, and then getting into their health that's attached to each person. And as long as it's not zero, I am calling that method that I have written in there, which is taking 25 damage. So if I go into my health, this is my health that's attached to each player. They all have a max health of 100, and then I'm tracking their current health, which is, begins as the max health, and their kill count and death count. So the take damage function, that's what it is here. If they're dead, then it's just not doing anything. Otherwise, I'm subtracting from the current health the amount of damage that they're taking. If it's less than zero, then I'm generating a death, which makes it my Boolean true, so it's not continually doing it. And then I'm adding to the death count, and then I'm respawning the player. And respawning the player, I do have a spawn point respawn, which is kind of attached to each player, that instead of completely kicking them out of the game, it's just respawning around where they died. And then setting that they're dead to false and giving their current health back to 100. And then here is where I'm throwing the text on the screen for what their count is for their death and for their killing. So that's kind of doing it right underneath. Where's my health bar? Oh, here it is. All right, so then here's my health bar that I'm also using, which is just kind of, I have like a foreground and a background, so like a red background and a green foreground, that I am just subtracting the foreground to match their health. So if they're at 50, and I have it as a length of 200, so if they're at 50, then it's going to be half the green bar, so then it looks like they're taking damage. So you're able to see what's happening to the player. The player networking, this is how I keep it from the local player being able to control all the other people. So when we start it, the player camera, if it is not mine, then I'm shutting off the other player's camera and shutting off all of the controls that are attached to each player. So only mine are going to remain active. Everybody else's is basically getting shut off. The play again, this gets generated on the game over screen. All I'm calling, if they click on the play again button, and it's just going to do whatever the current scene is, minus that, so it's going back to the BattleCars, because I only have 3 scenes. The quit is just calling, so if they push that, that's just calling the application.quit. I believe that's it. So building it, it really was not as difficult as what I thought. I was able to whip this up in like 3 days. I didn't need to do anything with the light. The ground was pretty much easy. I just, increased the size. And then my lobby camera, I positioned it, where I wanted it to go before we started the game. I didn't really have to do anything other than just making it not active. My photon network, I attached the text. That's what's here. And then I attached, the player one prefab that I had to have stored in the resources folder. So anything in here actually had to be in a straight resources folder for Photon Network to be able to reach it well. And then I have my lobby camera that was attached there. And then the winner panel and winner text that is here. They're set to not active unless a win is generated, like the end of the game, and then it's going to say the player. Um, okay, these are all the barriers that I put, and I just tagged them all as barriers so that I could check for collision to destroy the projectiles. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it really was not, when we're looking at the player, all I had to do was just really kind of attach things to it. So my player movement, once, I've built those, um, the variables in, then I could just drag and drop my stuff and I could adjust how I wanted things to work. The photon view script, we had to attach to anything that needed to be viewed inside the network. So I have like my transform, my rigid body view that's being viewed by everybody in the photon network. So that kind of runs all the time. And then the RPCs are called for specific things when I just need to send like simple data type stuff. So I'm having it view the bullet transforms and the player's health. My networking script, this gets attached. That's what I was talking about, so that only the local player is able to control his stuff. The health script, that is showing the different pieces that are on there for how many times they have killed, how many times they've died. And then I had to attach my spawn point for the player so that I can generate that. And then the health bar, it's just really that background, foreground. That's what was here. Oh, it's actually down here, my health bar. And then, yeah, that's basically it. Creating the players, the rigid body was super easy. All I had to do was just drag stuff, put it together on it, and it stayed together. I didn't have the same problem that I did when I was trying to do it with Blender and bullet physics. This was a lot easier to use. I did feel like I was able to whip something up really fast, but it felt like I was just kind of doing dragging and dropping. I didn't really feel like I was doing a lot of coding for the sake of coding. It just felt like I was just, I don't know, kind of building a game like Legos instead of actually programming it. But it was pretty good. I am going to add the GPS to it so that I can get like the Latin long and maybe add that as like the player name or something like that. And then vibration, which reading the documentation for Unity has an easy just handheld vibration method to call. So I'll probably do that for when a person gets hit by a projectile. And that would be really all the components. And then my next game would be more of something using libgdx to build a game that I'm actually going to want to design. But yeah, this is a lot of fun, and my kids actually had a lot of fun playing this. Same with my nephews. They were all kind of playing during Thanksgiving weekend. They had a lot of fun with it. All right, thanks.